Hello and welcome to today's yoga class. Today's sequence I like to call the yoga staple, and that's because it's the sequence that I go to if it's been a while since I've done any yoga or any exercise at all, or conversely, if I've done a lot of exercise that isn't yoga and I'm feeling a little bit tight, I'll come back to this sequence and it just makes everything feel so much better. So our first pose that I like to get back into is a one-legged stretch. So extending the right leg forward and allow your left leg to bend and tip out to the side. Lifting up nice and tall. There's always a tendency to want to kind of lift the flesh up and away, but it's important not to. And so what I like to do instead is to actually press down into the floor, lift up, and then equally just let those sit bones go to the floor. Okay? I'll explain why in a sec. So lifting up nice and tall, leaning forward towards your toes until you feel a stretch, gentle stretch. So we're going for gentle, and then hold. So what happens is if we do pull the flesh away, the leg muscles on the back of the leg are actually skewed then to the outside of the leg. And then when we go to bend forward, we have more intensity on the outside of the leg than the inside of the leg, and that can create a bit of an imbalance and create it's not nice for the muscles. We want to be nice to them when we stretch. So holding here, we won't hold things too long today in our staple practice. This is just for loosening things up, getting back into it, or getting into it in the beginning. And what we want to do is really relax the muscles. So there's a tendency when we feel that stretch to kind of like pull away from it. And if we're doing that, it means we're in it too far. So if you're noticing that, just come on up out of it a little bit. Relax and melt into it. Let's just take one deep breath here. And then slowly come on up, and then we'll switch sides. So bending the right, extending the left, and same thing. I like to lift up and just be equally on the squish. And that might sound crass, but it's really important and very good for us. So lifting up nice and tall, and then reaching forward for those toes until you feel a little resistance. So the key word there is little bit. Nice and gentle. It actually is the quickest way to gain mobility. It's counterintuitive. You would think no pain, no gain, but not true. Slow and steady. So that feeling of checking in with the body like we did on the first side. Am I gripping and trying to shy away from the stretch? If so, I'm in it too deeply. So every stretch is kind of like this constant communication between your muscles and your mind. So am I in it enough? No. Okay, I'll go a little bit further. Am I in it enough? Yes. And then we hold. And one way to consciously relax is just to take a deep breath. So one deep breath here. And allow yourself to soften just a little bit more for our last few moments here. And then slowly come on out. And then we'll get up and head into downward facing dog. So to get in that, I like to cross my legs and then lean forward a little bit onto hands and knees. And before that first downward facing dog, it's nice to do just a quick little wrist warmer upper. So let's just shift side to side. And this might not feel like anything, and that's okay. For me, I feel my hands actually stretching a little bit. I feel the wrists stretching a little bit. So again, if you feel nothing, that's great. We'll keep it that way. And then from here, we'll tuck the toes under. Press the hips up and back to a big V. Hips high to the sky and heading into that first downward facing dog. So taking a peek at your feet, we want them parallel. And it doesn't
really matter what the distance is between the feet. Eventually, we want them hips width apart, traditionally. But if you're feeling extra tightness in the legs and the backs of the legs, step the feet wide, and that should help a little bit. Eventually, they'll be hips width apart, and eventually, the heels will be down right at the floor. Until then, just allow the heels to move towards the floor, and just feel a nice stretch here. From here, scoop the belly in, gently lower the knees down to the mat, and come on back to seated for our next stretch. So the next one is the same but different. So once again, we'll reach the right leg forward, bend the left leg in and allow the knee to tip out towards the side. And it's the same stretch, but instead of moving forward straight towards the toes, we'll move towards the outside of the leg. So from here, lifting up nice and tall and reaching forward, forward, forward. So your left hand will reach towards your right foot or ankle, shin, whatever you can reach. And the right hand will move to the outside of the leg. So you might feel a nice stretch on the outside of the leg. And if you're like, I don't know, I can't tell the difference, it's okay. It's stretching slightly different, and it's creating a little bit of a different angle of the upper leg bone in the hip socket. So a little bit of a hip healthy pose, still stretching the back side of the leg. And we just hold here. And again, we're trying to, yoga's like partly stretching, partly strengthening, but also learning about the body too. So constantly having that communication that we talked about. So checking in instead of thinking about your to-do list or what you're doing later, thinking about right here, right now, what's happening. Am I in this stretch too much? If so, come on out a little bit. Or maybe I've been in the stretch a few moments, and so now I have a little bit more space. Well, then I'll move towards the foot a little bit more. Taking a deep breath here. And then slowly floating all the way up. And then we'll switch sides. So bending the right leg and extending the left. Again, I like to square everything up, lifting up nice and tall, and then leaning forward, forward, forward. So now my right hand is reaching towards my left foot, and then left hand on the outside. And just feeling the outside edge of the leg, or trying to. So again, we're just sort of learning about the body. Checking in, am I in it too much? Am I in the pose enough? Am I relaxing while I'm in the pose? And then slowly come on up. And then we'll head into downward dog again. So forward, crossing the legs, moving into hands and knees. And then we'll tuck the toes under, hips press up and back to a big V. This time, we'll walk the dog. So lowering one heel down towards the floor as the opposite knee bends. You can just get a little bit deeper into that pose, but super gentle. And then switch, so really slow. Sometimes I see people pedaling really quickly, but slower is better. Double checking that the feet are parallel. And that would be the insides of the feet. Because if you'll notice, this is a great angle to notice that the toes part of the foot is wider than the heel for most of us. So when you're trying to create parallel, we're lining up the insides of the feet. And then let's equal everything out. So both heels towards the floor. And then scoop the belly in, gently lower through hands and knees, and coming back to our seated position.
One last time, that same stretch, but a little bit different. So extending the right leg forward, allow the left leg to tip out to the side with a bent knee. This time moving towards the inside of the leg. So lifting up nice and tall and then reaching forward, forward, forward on the inside of the leg. So if you're really, really body aware, you might think, oh yeah, I can definitely tell this is a bit of a different stretch. If not, and you're like, I don't know, same difference, it's okay. Some days I'm one, some days I'm the other. So again, checking in. Am I in this pose enough? Am I in it too much? Am I relaxing? Where am I feeling this stretch? So just keeping that constant communication going between the muscles and the mind. And when the body gives you a little bit more space, even if it's just a millimeter, feel free to go ahead and take that space. Or of course, if the opposite's true, then you need to come out a little bit, no problem. And then slowly, slowly come on up. And then we'll switch sides. So we'll bend through the right knee, letting the knee tip out to the side, extending the left, lifting up nice and tall, and then reaching forward, but on the inside of the front leg. Same again. Moving to the point of resistance, not pushing past it. Just allowing that gentle stretch. And this pose that we're doing right now, it is a traditional yoga posture called Janu Shirshasana, but right now we're doing just a few variations of that pose. And in a more kind of relaxed way, we're not necessarily thinking lengthening, lifting, scooping the belly in. We're thinking of, let's just get back into things, stretch things out a little bit. And then slowly, slowly come on up. And then we'll head once more into downward facing dog. Forward. And this time we'll focus on the shoulders. Tucking the toes under, hips press up and back. And then to access the shoulders for a stretch, what we do is bend the knees a little bit and then allow your heart to reach towards your feet. And then feel the stretch in the shoulders. If you can, from here, start to slowly straighten through the legs as much as they'll let you. No further. But just shifting that stretch towards the shoulders. And then nice and slow, scoop the belly in. And then gently lower through hands and knees. And then come on all the way to seated. So different variations of downward facing dog. Sometimes when you're new to yoga, you're like, I don't know, I just feel like it's difficult to do, and that's totally okay. And then from here, we'll work on the arms a little bit. So lifting up nice and tall. Let's take the right arm, raising it up high to the sky, and then bend the elbow so that the fingertips are reaching down the back. Take the other hand, so left hand to right elbow, and you can see how my elbow's pointing kind of kitty corner. What I'm trying to do is guide gently, so not reefing on it, but gently guide the elbow towards the back of the head. So eventually it'll be straight up to the sky as the fingertips are reaching down the back. So gently is the operative word here. And then eventually we'll be able to lift the chin. And you can notice how that increases the stretch, but only go as far as your body wants you to today. So the trick is to, if you are in the stretch too much, your body will try to fight against it. And we want to do the opposite of that. So only until you feel a little resistance and then softening into it. And then slowly, slowly release. Taking a second because I need to. If you have really tight shoulders, that's a doozy. So even if we're gentle, some stretches feel just easier than others. So for some people, their legs are a little bit more flexible or easier to stretch. For me, it's shoulders, not so much. So left arm high to the sky, sending it back. And then again, you can notice how before the stretch, my elbow is out to the side. I'm going to try to guide it behind the head and keeping the fingertips down the back. And eventually, maybe lifting the chin. I'm not able to do that very far, so it feels awkward, which is good. Most yoga poses do feel awkward, so if you're feeling awkward, you're probably doing it correctly. Couple deep breaths here. And then slowly, slowly release. Taking a second. And then, so this stretch is part of a bigger stretch called cow face pose. And we're doing one arm at a time, not even worrying about the legs right now because this is our stable practice and we get to just play things nice and easy. So if you have a yoga strap, go and find that now. You don't need one, but it's nice to have. It's a nice to have, not a need to have. So for this one, what we do is if you have one of those yoga straps that have the loop-de-loop here, pretty sure that's the official name for it, then holding onto it like so, and then we want to bring your arm behind the back, doesn't matter which one. And then take the strap and bring it up and over the opposite shoulder. Okay, so if my left arm is behind my back, I've got it up and over my right shoulder. Now what I'm trying to do is, right now, my lower arm is just straight across my back. I'm trying to get the back of my hand between my shoulder blades. So if you can visualize, if you can't see behind your back, right, because our eyes are in front of us, this is what we're trying to do. Learn about the body. Just feel where your hand is. I can feel my hand is not between my shoulder blades. So I'm just going to very, very carefully, because this arm, my top arm, is stronger than my bottom arm is flexible. So be careful. So very gently and carefully, I'm going to kind of scooch as I inch up on my strap. And you don't have to be graceful in yoga, thank goodness. And then once you're in, as far as you feel like you can today, so that's little resistance, right? I feel like I could be here all day because it's a little bit of resistance, not a lot. Then what I want to do is both shoulders back and even my elbows as well. So shoulders and elbows back, lifting up nice and tall. I'm trying not to arch my back though. There's a difference. Usually when we draw the elbows and shoulders back, we tend to arch the back. So try to lift up nice and tall. Really gentle though. If you draw the shoulders and elbows back too much, it will feel too intense, and that's counterproductive. So lifting up tall, drawing the shoulders and elbows back. Deep breath. And then slowly, slowly release, and we'll switch sides. So I'm just going to lasso my other hand there and then up and over the opposite shoulder. One thing to note is that whatever your dominant arm is usually the tighter one. So knowing that that's normal, and then scooching, try not to scrunch up my face while I scooch my arm behind me. Trying to get the back of the hand between the shoulder blades. It might not get anywhere near, and that's okay. Then, once we're in as much as our body will allow, lifting up tall, drawing the shoulders and elbows back gently. And again, if one side is tighter than the other, it's okay. Things loosen up over time, and they equal up, and we breathe. So again, checking in. Am I in this pose enough? Am I in it too far? And then slowly, slowly release. Oh. And then I always like to say move like you're 108. Sometimes I have no option. That is how I move. So from here, we'll give the arms and shoulders a little rest and head back to the legs. So for this next one, it's called half hero. And it's a fun one. I think it's called hero pose because you have to practically be one in order to do the full pose. But we do the beginnings of the pose until we can go further. So from here, we'll extend both legs forward. And then let's do the left leg first. So bend the left leg. And what we're trying to do is send the top of the foot, so the shoelaces part of the foot on the floor, and it's beside the hip. So you're not sitting on the foot, it's beside the hip. So we don't want to flex the foot in like a W sit. We want to point the toes and have the shoelaces part on the floor. So if you're already kind of here going, I am stuck, that's normal. So unless you have, as one of my yoga students calls it, flopsy ankles. But Carla, what if you don't have flopsy ankles? Don't worry, this pose will help with that. So as much as available. So we can move the leg away from the body, kind of like an accordion. The closer it is to the body, the more challenging it is, the more mobility that's required. And conversely, if we move the leg away from us, it requires a little bit less mobility. So it's a choose your own adventure. Draw the leg in as close as it can, and then lift up tall. So eventually we want the hip, both of them down towards the ground. If we're not there yet, that's okay. You can lean away from the bent leg. So from here, what we're trying to do, this is like a multitasker, which I love. So we are actually trying to stretch the top of the ankle and maybe a little bit the knee. So for knee joint health and the quadriceps. So for most of us, we feel one more than the other kind of a thing. A lot of people will feel the ankle and nothing else, and that's okay. What we're trying to do is find an equal stretch in all three areas, but that takes time. So if you're like, I don't know, everything feels like it's stretching, that's okay. Just make sure that it's gentle. If you are flexible in all three areas and you want further leaning back, so what happens is once you do get those flopsy ankles, which indicates nice healthy ankles that we're all hoping to attain here, and your knee is fairly mobile and you've got full range of motion here, we might not feel the quadriceps as much, so the top of the leg here. What we do is we lean back, and eventually you can lie all the way back. And if you're still not feeling a stretch, if you bend the other leg, and then you can sort of choose your own adventure here. So if I'm looking for more of a stretch, I'm trying to reach my hip right snug up against my ankle, double checking the shoelaces part of the foot's on the floor, and then holding. We're not here too long today. I've already yammered at you so much that we're almost done. So let's slowly switch sides. Come on out and we'll unfold the leg. A couple little knee taps. So like we were talking about, you're actually stretching the knee joint. So there's lots going on there, lots of ligaments and fun stuff in there. So it's nice to do a couple little knee taps to let the blood flow back again. Other side. So bending through the right leg. Same thing again. So same care and attention on that second side. Maybe you want to move the leg a little bit away from you, the foot away from the hip. Double check the shoelaces part of the foot is on the floor. And then again, you're trying to find that equal stretch between the ankle, the knee, and the top of the leg. And if you have no idea, that's totally okay. Just getting into this pose as much as available. And then again, if you're not feeling a stretch at all, you can bend that other leg and then leaning back. Maybe you're lying all the way back. And just a couple deep breaths here. This stretch is so important, I think, because When we exercise or we participate in sports, we usually will do some stretching, but we often stretch the back side of the legs. We'll reach for our toes. We'll sit with the feet forward and reach for our toes. And we'll incorporate those types of stretches, but we will not as often stretch the front side of the legs. So I like to sneak those in wherever possible in our yoga classes. And then slowly come on out, and then a couple little knee taps. I love that one. So I was talking before about my shoulders are tight, and I don't like those stretches, but I do them anyway. But these ones I really like. So the next one is a low lunge, and for this one, if you have yoga blocks, they're really helpful, and a blanket, a yoga blanket, or any reasonable facsimile. So if you have blocks, you can place one on each side of you, or a couch near you to hold on to. And then for the yoga blanket, or a towel, or any blanket, or a couch cushion, placing that where your knees will be. So now, kneeling on the blanket, let's step the right foot forward. I'm gonna pull up my pants for this one. Another one that Carla doesn't like as much, but it's so good for us. So then, transferring that weight forward, and then lifting up nice and tall. So we're targeting the hip flexor of the left leg, and then you could even, this is why I love these blocks, because they're different levels, different heights. And so if you have them on the tallest level, then it helps you lift up nice and tall. So we're trying to stretch. You might feel the stretch in the front hip, but we're really trying to target the front of the back hip. So lifting up tall helps that. And then if it's too much of a stretch, you can use arm strength to lessen the stretch a little bit. If you just sort of sink and relax into it, that might be too much. So we can place a little bit of arm strength into the blocks. But don't worry, we're not here too long. Some of these stretches are safe to hold for actually 5 minutes, some of them more. But we're just holding kind of about a minute for these ones. When we're in a stretch, we're supposed to find stillness. I'm a fidgeter, so it takes all of my focus and concentration to hold and breathe. Last deep breath here. And then we'll slowly switch sides, so moving like we're 108. Sometimes out of necessity, sometimes because we're just trying to be nice to our body, and then other side. So left leg forward, right leg back, and then once you're in, lifting up nice and tall. Hands on your blocks or your couch or whatever you're holding on to for a little bit of stability. One of the reasons is because it helps you be upright. You want your torso as upright as available, but also just for balance. So if you had nothing, then it requires strength to hold on, and then we aren't able to relax into it as much. So do use those props. And a few deep breaths. So trying to find stillness in the stretch. And then slowly, slowly, come on out. Okay, so for these next ones, you might need a cushion or a block to sit on, and it depends on your hip mobility. So for this one, I'm going to get rid of mine. We sit cross-legged to start, and it's called shoelaces. I'm going to go kind of kitty corner for this one to show you, I think. So with cross-legged, I have my right leg in front, I think most people cross their legs with the right leg in front. If not, then situate yourself with the right leg in front, or the wrong leg, and then keep your left leg where it is, and then move the right leg so that the foot's on the floor. What we want to do with that left leg is situate the knee so it's right straight in front of you, in line with the navel. And that already might have a little bit of a stretch on the outside of that hip. Then we're going to cross the right leg over, and eventually one knee will stack on top of the other. So I want to scooch this foot all the way back towards the opposite hip until one knee is stacked on top of the other. So this is a proper yoga knot. Most of us cannot do that if we haven't done years of practice. So if that's you, my advice is always, wherever you get stuck, just hold. And if you're leaning back a little, that's okay too. Hold. However, if you're up on a block, it will make it infinitely easier. Sometimes I have students up on 2 blocks, and that's okay. And then wherever you get stuck, just hold. So eventually we're trying to be upright, but if you're leaning back onto the hands, that's okay too. And then if you are really flexible in this pose, what you can do is actually lean forward and then shift and scooch the knees really close and snug, and then sit back down between the feet. And then hold. Trying not to fidget. Breathing. This pose I find actually is a little bit more challenging once you do have flexibility, but not quite enough to be completely on the floor, because then it's like, oh, do I spend all that effort to go find a blanket and then sit up on a blanket or a block or something? Because if a block is too thick, then you'll want to move to a folded towel or blanket. And yes, it's worth it. If you only need just a couple millimeters to help you, it is, because then you'll be able to relax just a little bit more. Let's come on out. So untying those shoelaces, bring the feet forward, couple little knee taps, and then raveling up other sides. So from cross-legged with the left leg in front, we'll just scooch the right knee right straight up to center, aligning with the central axis of the body, and then left foot crosses over. And then we're trying to get the left knee right on top of the right as much as it will. So maybe you're up on a block, maybe you're up on a blanket, maybe you're quite flexible and you want to lean forward, scooch those knees all the way together and sit back. And then come on up. And sometimes there's one hip that's tighter than the other. So that can happen for a number of reasons, maybe falling off your bike as a kid or all sorts of reasons. Sometimes for moms, if you're carrying a child on one hip can get a little bit tighter. Just a couple deep breaths here. And come on out. Oh, that's a gooder. So feet forward, a couple little knee taps. And then heading into everyone's favorite stretch. So that would be straddle. Send the feet apart as far as they will go in opposite directions. I often have a little hip crack here. So lifting up tall, this is one where it's a struggle to stay upright for most people. So again, you might want to be up on a folded blanket or a block or just leaning back and then eventually leaning forward. So feet apart as far as they'll go and lifting up nice and tall, leaning forward, maybe even closing your eyes for this one.
This one for most of us is quite intense, so we want to relax as much as available, and that usually requires just a bit of concentration, a little bit of focus. So we breathe. And for poses like this that are a little more intense, I like to really focus on the breathing. All yogic breathing is through the nose. In, out, always through the nose, unless otherwise indicated. And there's actually only one pose called lion that we breathe through the mouth. So through the nose, there's lots of good important reasons for that, but through the nose, and on every exhale through the nose, soften. Okay, so that's probably the best advice for a pose like this. Inhaling nice and slow through the nose, exhaling, and relax on every exhale specifically. So yes, feeling relaxed throughout, but it's easier for us to focus on one specific movement when we're relaxing. So on every exhale, softening a little bit more. Same thing though, checking in. Am I in this pose too much? Yes, come on out a little. No, maybe there's room for a little bit more of a stretch. And then slowly, slowly come on out. And finding a fetal position after that one. So our next stretch, we don't have very many left in our staple practice. The next one is a hip opener, but it's a bit different than the shoelaces. It's called fire log. So for this one, I like to start with, if you're a little bit tighter in the hips, leaning back with the knees bent. So I'm back on my hands, knees are bent. What I'll do here is cross the right ankle over the left knee, and you might need to even help it there. So right ankle over the left knee, and then leaning back and holding here. If this is enough of a stretch, just stay here. And then the way we progress this one is the chest moves forward towards the legs, and wherever you get stuck, just hold, or wherever you feel resistance, when you feel like this is enough of a stretch. If you are quite flexible in this position and you want to go further, the full pose is the bottom foot scooches in. And then, I'm going to change the angle here to show you. I'll go kitty corner. Eventually, we have the right knee on top of the left ankle and the left ankle on top of the opposite knee over ankle. And then what happens is we tend to be kind of like cross-legged. So what we want though is the lower legs to be parallel to each other. So we shift the feet away from us, and then the lower legs are stacked like fire logs. Some things to know. Blocks are your friend. So you can have a block underneath the top knee. You can have a block underneath the bottom knee. You could have both. You could have two blocks. You could have a cushion. Some people find they need it kind of higher up here. So what we want to do, this is a choose your own adventure too, or maybe trial and error is a better phrase for that. We want to be sure that the knees feel zero pain, absolutely none. And we're feeling all of the stretch in the hips. And the hips are funny. They like to guard, and the knees are like, no, I'll do it. So, which is not the best, because the hips are a larger joint that are more capable of taking a stretch than the knees. So we have to trick them and be sure that the knees are not taking the brunt of this rotation in the hip joint, and the hips are taking all of the rotation of the hip joint. So that's where the cushions come in handy. Once you're in, relaxing. I've talked us basically through that whole stretch. Let's come on out. And that should feel amazing. So extend the legs forward, couple little knee taps, and then we will get raveled up onto the other side here. So once again, we'll start with the first phase, which is back onto the hands, knees are bent, crossing the left ankle over the right knee, and you might need to help it there. And then holding here or moving forward until you feel resistance, wherever that might be. Now again, you might have one hip that's tighter. You might have been able to go further on that first side, but now we're stuck. That's okay. Wherever you get stuck, just hold, no judgment, no thoughts other than,
Am I in it too far? Am I in it far enough? All of those things that we talked about. And then if you want to go further, once again, scooching in that bottom leg. And then blocks, blankets, cushions as needed. And once you're in, holding, trying to find stillness, trying not to fidget too much except for where needed to adjust either further into the pose or pulling back a little bit. And again, checking in with the bodies, those same things. I say that like a broken record. Am I in it far enough? Am I in it too far? Adjusting as needed. And then slowly, slowly come on out and send the feet forward, couple little knee taps. We're almost done, and the last two poses are the best. So we'll head into a spinal twist, lying all the way back. There's 3 different variations. One is super mild, the next one is a little bit more challenging, and the third is the most challenging. So we lay all the way back onto our backs. Let's start with the knees bent, feet on the floor, arms into a T position, palms facing down. And then lift and scooch the hips to the right. So what I'm trying to do, this will take all of my communication skills. I want my left hip to land so it's in line with the central axis of my body. So left hip, I'm lifting and scooching to the right so that my left hip is in line with my neck, if that makes sense, okay? So then I'll send both my knees to the left. And now my right hip is stacked on top of the left hip, and both my hips are in line with my neck and my head. And then to finish the pose, look over to the right. So now I've got a full spinal twist. If I want to increase that stretch a bit, keep the top leg bent, extend the bottom leg, and you can get a bit more of a stretch. And if you're looking for more stretch still, bend the bottom leg onto the inside of the top knee so your legs are crossed all the way over. All the way over. That one's called twisted roots. And then the most important part of this one is to be sure that the shoulders remain firmly on the floor. So that right shoulder is pinned down to the floor. You might want to block beneath the knee or knees. And we relax here. The other thing to keep in mind is we want the knees to be straight out to the side from the hip joint. We don't want the knees down. So if the legs start to straighten a bit, then the knee moves down away from the arm. And we want, if anything, to bring the knees maybe even up a little tiny bit. Where the legs are changes the stretch and the location of the stretch in the back. So we're trying to target the mid-back for a stretch in this one. To come out, we could just bring the legs up, but a better, healthier way is to scoop the belly in, so strong belly, and feel like you're pressing the low back into the floor and the legs are just sort of following. So it's the belly doing the work. And then we unravel and unwind, square everything back up so the hips move back to center, and then between sides, to be sure we're all squared up, hug the knees in, little rock side to side. And then other side. So remember the variation you did on the first side. Arms in a T position, palms facing down. Whatever variation we're doing, we lift and scooch the hips to the left and the knees go to the right, the knee or knees. Keep the shoulders on the floor. That left shoulder will want to pop up off the floor. Don't let it. And to come out,
Once again, we scoop the belly in and press the low back into the floor and allow the legs to follow. Unraveling, unwinding, square it all up, hug the knees in, maybe a little rock side to side for a nice little massage on the back. And then we're ready for Shavasana. So this is why I love yoga, because we get a nap time at the end of class. So if your back requires a little extra support, keep the knees bent with the feet on the floor, and then you can step the feet apart and let the knees tip in. Otherwise, extend the legs, arms along the sides, palms facing up, and close the eyes. Softening everything. But especially through the neck and the shoulders and all the way down the arms. Letting the fingers softly curl. Softening through the face. Softening around the eyes. And even the muscle between the eyes. Just letting it all go. But we're not here long. Starting to come back, wiggling the fingers and the toes. And gently roll your head from side to side. Then reaching your arms above head on the floor for a big stretch, feeling totally refreshed. Bending your knees, gently roll over to the right side, pausing there for a moment. And slowly press yourself all the way up to a cross-legged seated position, taking all the time you need. And when you arrive, palms facing up on the knees. Inhale, sitting up tall. Exhale, softly close the eyes. And taking those final moments to thank yourself for showing up to your practice today and taking care of you. And slowly open the eyes. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a really good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.